welcome back, guys. We were in the middle of chapter 7 called Mudbloods and Murmurs. Remember yesterday we found out that Draco Malfoy is going to be the new Seeker for Slytherin and that his dad has bought Nimbus 2001s, the fastest racing brooms, for the Slytherins. And Hermione made a comment that he had bought his way onto the team and he wasn't talented enough. Malfoy called her a mudblood, and we're not exactly sure what that means yet, but we know it wasn't very nice. Everyone got really angry, and when Ron tried to cast a spell on Malfoy, his broken wand sent him flying backwards. Ron, are you all right? Squealed Hermione. Ron opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he gave an almighty "Ugh," and several slugs dribbled out of his mouth onto his lap. The Slytherin team were paralyzed with laughter. Flint was doubled up, hanging on to his new broomstick for support. Malfoy was on all fours, banging the ground with his fists. The Gryffindors were gathered around Wand, who kept belching large, glistening slugs. Nobody wanted to touch him. "We better get him to Hagrid's. It's nearest," said Harry to Hermione, who nodded bravely, and the pair of them pulled Ron up by the arms. "What happened, Harry? What happened? Is he sick? You can't cure him, can you?" Colin had run down from his seat and was dancing alongside them as they left the field. Ron gave a huge heave and more slugs dribbled down his front. "Ooh," said Colin, fascinated and raising his camera. "Can you hold him still, Harry?" "Get out of the way, Colin," said Harry angrily. He and Hermione supported Ron out of the stadium and across the grounds towards the edge of the forest. "Nearly there, Ron," said Hermione, as the gamekeeper's cabin came into view. "You'll be all right in a minute. We're almost there." They were within 20 feet of Hagrid's house when the front door opened, but it wasn't Hagrid who came out. Gilderoy Lockhart, wearing robes of palest mauve today, came striding out. "Quick, behind here," Harry hissed, dragging Ron behind a nearby bush. Hermione followed, somewhat reluctantly. "It's a simple matter if you know what you're doing," Lockhart was saying loudly to Hagrid. "If you need help, you know where I am. I'll let you have a copy of my book. I'm surprised you haven't already got one. I'll sign one tonight and send it over. Well, goodbye." And he strode away towards the castle. Harry waited until Lockhart was out of sight, then pulled Ron out of the bush and up to Hagrid's front door. They knocked urgently. Hagrid appeared at once, looking very grumpy, but his expression brightened when he saw who it was. "Been wondering when you'd come to see me. Come in. I thought you might be Professor Lockhart back again." Harry and Hermione supported Ron over the threshold into the one-roomed cabin, which had an enormous bed in one corner, a fire crackling merrily in the other. Hagrid didn't seem perturbed by Ron's slug problem, which Harry hastily explained as he lowered Ron into a chair. "Better out than in," he said cheerfully, putting a large copper basin in front of him. "Get 'em all up, Ron." "I don't think there's anything to do except for wait for it to stop," said Hermione anxiously, watching Ron bend over the basin. "That's a difficult curse to work at the best of times, but with a broken wand." Hagrid was bustling around making them tea. His boarhound Fang was slobbering over Harry. "What did Lockhart want with you, Hagrid?" Harry asked, scratching Fang's ears. "Giving me advice on getting kelpies out of a well," growled Hagrid, moving a half-plucked rooster off his scrubbed table and setting down the teapot. "Like I don't know, and banging on about some banshee he banished. If one word of it was true, I'll eat my kettle." It was not like Hagrid to criticize a Hogwarts teacher, and Harry looked at him in surprise. Hermione, however, said in a voice somewhat higher than usual, "I think you're being a bit unfair. Professor Dumbledore obviously thought he was the best man for the job." "He was the only man for the job," said Hagrid, offering them a plate of fudge while Ron coughed into his basin. "And I mean the only one. It's getting difficult to find anyone for the dark arts job. People aren't keen to take it, see? They're starting to think it's jinxed. No one's lasted long for a while now." "So tell me," said Hagrid, jerking his head at Ron, "who was he trying to curse?" Malfoy called Hermione something. It must have been really bad because everyone went wild. It was bad, said Ron hoarsely, emerging over the tabletop, looking pale and sweaty. Malfoy called her a mudblood, Hagrid. Ron dived out of sight again as a fresh wave of slugs made their appearance. Hagrid looked outraged. He didn't, he growled at Hermione. He did, she said, but I don't know what it means. I could tell it was really rude, of course. It's about the most insulting thing he could think of, gasped Ron, coming back up. Mudblood is a really foul name for someone who's muggle-born. You know, non-magic parents. There are some wizards, like Malfoy's family, who think they're better than everyone else because they're what people call pure blood. He gave a small burp and a single slug fell into his hand. He threw it in the basin and continued. I mean, the rest of us know it doesn't make any difference at all. Look at Neville Longbottom. He's pure blood and he can hardly stand a cauldron up the right way. And they haven't invented a spell that our Hermione can't do, said Hagrid proudly, making Hermione go a brilliant shade of magenta. It's a disgusting thing to call someone, said Ron, wiping his sweaty brow with a shaking hand. Dirty blood, see? Common blood. It's ridiculous. Most wizards these days are half-blooded anyway. If we hadn't married muggles, we would have died out. He retched and ducked out of sight again. Well, I don't blame you for trying to curse him, Ron, said Hagrid loudly over the thuds of more slugs hitting the basin. But maybe it was a good thing your wand backfired. I suspect Lucius Malfoy would have come marching up to the school if you'd have cursed his son. At least you're not in trouble. Harry would have pointed out that trouble didn't come much worse than having slugs pouring out of your mouth, but he couldn't. Hagrid's fudge had cemented his jaws together. Harry, said Hagrid abruptly, as though struck by a sudden thought, I got a bone to pick with you. I heard you've been giving out signed photos. How come I haven't gotten one? Furious, Harry wrenched his teeth apart. I have not been giving out signed photos, he said hotly. If Lockhart is still spreading that around. But then he saw that Hagrid was laughing. I'm only joking, he said, patting Harry on the back. I knew you hadn't really. I told Lockhart you didn't need to. You're more famous than him without trying. I bet he didn't like that, said Harry, sitting up and rubbing his chin. I don't think he did, said Hagrid with his eyes twinkling. Then I told him I'd never read one of his books and he decided to go. Fudge, Ron, he added as Ron reappeared. No thanks, said Ron weakly. I better not risk it. Come on, see what I've been growing, said Hagrid, as Harry and Hermione finished the last of her tea. In the small vegetable patch behind Hagrid's house were a dozen of the largest pumpkins Harry had ever seen. Each one was the size of a large boulder. Getting on well, aren't they, said Hagrid happily, for the Halloween feast. They should be big enough by then. What have you been feeding them, said Harry. Hagrid looked over his shoulder to check that they were alone. Well, I've been giving them, you know, a bit of help. Harry noticed Hagrid's flowery pink umbrella leaning against the back wall of the cabin. Harry had reason to believe before now that this umbrella was not all that it looked. In fact, he had the strong impression that Hagrid's old school wand was hidden inside it. Hagrid wasn't supposed to use magic. He had been expelled from Hogwarts in his 3rd year, but Harry had never found out why. Any mention of the matter, and Hagrid was clear his throat loudly and become mysteriously deaf until the subject was changed. An engorgement charm, I suppose, said Hermione, halfway between disapproval and amusement. Well, you've done a good job on 'em. That's what your little sister said Hagrid, nodding at Ron. I met her yesterday. Hagrid looked sideways at Harry, his beard twitching. She said she was just looking around the grounds, but I reckon she was hoping she might run into someone else at my house. He winked at Harry. If you ask me, she wouldn't say no to a signed picture. Oh, shut up, said Harry. Ron snorted with laughter and the ground was sprayed with slugs. Watch it, Hagrid roared, pulling Ron away from his precious pumpkins. It was nearly lunchtime, and as Harry had only one bit of fudge since dawn, he was keen to go back to school to eat. They said goodbye to Hagrid and walked back up to the castle. Ron was hiccuping occasionally, but only bringing up 2 very small slugs. They had barely set foot in the cool entrance hall when a voice rang out. There you are, Potter! Weasley! Professor McGonagall was walking towards them, looking stern. "You will both do your detentions this evening." "What are we doing, Professor?" said Ron, nervously suppressing a burp. "You will be polishing the silver in the trophy room with Mr. Filch," said Professor McGonagall. "And no magic, Weasley. Elbow grease." Ron gulped. Argus Filch was the caretaker, and he was loathed by every student in the school. "And you, Potter, will be helping Professor Lockhart answer his fan mail," said Professor McGonagall. "Oh, no, Professor, please. Can't I go and do the trophy room too?" said Harry desperately. "Certainly not," said Professor McGonagall, raising her eyebrows. "Professor Lockhart requested you particularly. 8 o'clock sharp, both of you." Harry and Ron slouched into the great hall in states of deepest gloom, Hermione behind them, wearing a well-you-did-break-school rules sort of expression. Harry didn't enjoy his shepherd's pie as much as he'd thought. He and Ron felt like they had got the worst deal. "Filch will have me there all night," said Ron. "No magic. There must be 100 cups in that room, and I'm not good at muggle cleaning." "I'd swap any time," said Harry. "I've had loads of practice with the Dursleys. Answering Lockhart's fan mail, he'll be a nightmare." Saturday afternoon seemed to melt away, and in what seemed like no time it was 5 minutes to 8, and Harry was dragging his feet along the second-floor corridor to Lockhart's office. He gritted his teeth and knocked. The door flew open at once. Lockhart beamed down at him. "Ah, here's the scallywag," he said. "Come in, Harry, come in." Shining brightly on the walls by the light of many candles were countless framed photographs of Lockhart. He had even signed a few of them. Another large pile lay on his desk. "You can address the envelopes," Lockhart told Harry, as though this was a huge treat. "The first one is to Gladys Gudgeon, bless her, huge fan of mine." The minutes snailed by. Harry let Lockhart's voice wash over him, saying and right and yeah. Now and then he caught a phrase like "Fame's a fickle friend, Harry," or "Celebrity is as celebrity does, remember that." The candles burned lower and lower, making the light dance over the many moving faces of Lockhart watching him. Harry moved his aching hand over what felt like the 1,000th envelope, writing out Veronica Smelthley's address. It must be time to leave, Harry thought. Please let it be time to leave. And then he heard something quite different from the spitting of dying candles and Lockhart's prattle about his fans. It was a voice to chill the bone marrow, a voice of breathing, ice-cold venom. Come to me. Let me rip you. Let me tear you. Let me kill you." Harry gave a huge jump, and a large lilac blot appeared on Veronica Smelthley's street. "What?" he said loudly. "I know," said Lockhart. 6 solid months at the top of the bestseller list. Broke all the records." "No," said Harry frantically. "That voice." "Sorry," said Lockhart, looking puzzled. "What voice?" That voice that said, 'Didn't you hear it?'" Lockhart was looking at Harry in astonishment. "What are you talking about, Harry? Perhaps you're getting drowsy. Great Scott, look at the time. We've been here nearly 4 hours. I would have never believed it. The time has flown, hasn't it?" Harry didn't answer. He was straining his ears to hear the voice again, but there was no sound now, except for Lockhart telling him he mustn't expect a treat like this every time he got detention. Feeling dazed, Harry left. It was so late that the Gryffindor common room was almost empty. Harry went straight up to the dormitory. Ron wasn't back yet. Harry pulled on his pajamas, got into bed, and waited. Half an hour later, Ron arrived, nursing his right arm and bringing a strong smell of polish into the darkened room. "My muscles have all seized up," he groaned, sinking on his bed. 14 times he made me buff up that Quidditch cup before he was satisfied. Then I had another slug attack, all over a special award for services to the school. It took ages to get the slime off. How was it with Lockhart?" Keeping his voice low so not to wake Neville, Dean, and Seamus, Harry told Ron exactly what he heard. "And Lockhart said he couldn't hear it," said Ron. Harry could see him frowning in the moonlight. "Do you think he was lying? I don't get it. Even someone invisible would have had to open the door." "I know," said Harry, lying back on his bed and staring at the canopy above him. "I don't get it either." All right, tomorrow we'll read Chapter 8, The Death Day Party.